faces. I'm guessing there's not any. Any objection to the meeting minutes for the March 3rd, Kevin?
No, I have none.
All right, we'll consider those approved then. Move on to section 266, the most exciting part of our code. I'm gonna miss it. I mean, we'll pour some beer out at the end of this.
All right. We'll find something else. We'll find other sections of the code maybe. So I was away on vacation when you all went through these last month. So do you wish to walk through them one more time?
We might as well. You can be very brief because we did actually go more in depth than we probably anticipated last time. So
okay, so 26601-2 is the first one that we have, and this is for the personnel policy and the coverage. This is to clarify who is covered and who isn't covered, and remind everyone if there's a collective bargaining agreement that's in play, that will trump this. But if the CBA is silent on whatever matter happens to be, then we would reference the personnel policy or the handbook. Okay. 26601-3. We have this long nomenclature section that's being replaced by the pay bands that we have approved through the wage survey that we did over the last several years. So we would just be referencing the pay bands going forward as opposed to all these separate job titles.
okay. You have any questions on any?
I don't have any questions.
Feel free to intervene if you have.
No, I don't. I've got a good opportunity to look at this.
26605-2 is another reference to a pay band as opposed to specific job titles. The hourly positions are strictly in pay band E now. All the other pay bands are salaried exempt.
Okay. And before we get to the next one, I'll just kind of, state for the record, all we're doing with those first ones, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically amending them to just reference our pay bands.
Correct.
Okay. Now this next one's a little interesting, but I think we all understand it at this point.
266.08-2. So it talks about vacation eligibility. Predominantly, the goal is to allow a little flexibility when we're trying to make job offers. There isn't the time factor becomes an issue if we need to come to personnel and then come to council to ask for what we may offer, or if there's a counter offer from a candidate that we're in the process of trying to hire. That certainly puts a little crimp in the time frame for me to work with when we're making job offers. And with the 18 open vacancies I have right now on my board, I need all the help I can get.
And I would assume that we still have to approve the department heads and things like that through council proceedings.
The charter would still require
Yeah.
the council approve those department heads that are listed out in the charter.
So I mean, the main ones we still would have quite a bit of
Correct.
oversight on.
Right, for those appointed positions, yes.
And I think it's
And
a
you
fair
yourself will be
yeah.
part of the interview process as personnel chair.
No, I think I have been very impressed with how we've been handling the hires, honestly. So,
And just as a reminder, in codified ordinance 39-2021, that was when council approved the new pay band system versus the wage matrix. And it was noted in the legislation that administration would advise the personnel committee on the compensation and fringe benefits of all new hires.
Yep.
So we would continue to do that moving forward. So you would be well aware of any vacation time that would be given above and beyond our typical ordinance language.
I guess when we're doing that, is that going to be after you guys do a new hire, you're going to present that to this committee then?
Yes.
And then we'll just be able to kind of reflect on the numbers?
Yes, you'll be able to understand what it is we did, why we did what we did. And then, as I said earlier, if you feel administration is abusing that authority or overstepping that authority, you can modify the codified ordinances. And for your information, I did do a survey of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 area governments, and all of them give the I'll say administration, the ability to account for prior service credit from another appointing authority
Yeah.
when calculating vacation. We're looking to do the same thing.
I honestly, in order to be competitive, I think it's necessary, and I want you guys to be
And
able to
strangely
get good
enough-
candidates.
Strangely enough, in one of the instances, their fringe benefits are not even in their codified ordinances. It falls to the mayor and their administrator to make that determination.
Yeah, and I really think the only way we come into a disagreement between potential disagreement with council and administration would be if there's some sort of nepotism or something that's happening where we're seeing something a little strange. So I have no problem with making sure we get quality candidates and giving you guys the leverage you need to secure them, so.
And the labor market right now, everybody knows is really tough to get good people, right? And everybody's shopping around to find the best location or the conditions and things are more important sometimes than the initial on the check.
Well, and the great thing about vacation for this group of employees, it doesn't cost the city.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this doesn't mind any type of other, like collective bargaining or anything else?
That's all very spelled out in all of the collective bargaining agreements, so this would
Okay.
purely apply to non-bargaining employees.
Okay. But there wouldn't be, I guess there wouldn't be a conflict the way we're going to set this up with any collective bargaining unit employees with
Now, all
this.
collective bargaining unit employees, they're CBH trump, so all of the lateral transfer language, such as years' experience, is very specific in our collective bargaining agreements, and that all trumps this.
Okay, so, but this here, I guess what I'm asking, this will be a minimum, but could exceed what it would be in there potentially be in any of the CBAs?
Yes, if your question is, could this be more generous than a collective bargaining agreement, the answer is yes.
Okay,
And obviously, each go-around of collective bargaining, they have the ability to make any request and negotiate any of the benefits that are in the collective bargaining.
And you and I are both well aware that they'll use the new hire information. As part of those.
I guess that's kind of why,
I know,
you know,
we offered
We
this,
did
and
recently.
they rejected it.
We had one contract that rejected the notion of a lateral transfer to allow for service credit. We had the police, which embraced it, and fire recently has language in their contract, but only for a entry-level position, not to allow a lateral transfer from another jurisdiction for a captain or lieutenant.
And I think
Okay.
it's wages.
They basically,
Wages
they
only, vacation
can't
doesn't
turn over the
transfer.
yeah, I understand that, right? But again, when you're in competition,
Yep.
you know.
Makes sense for us as a city, I think.
I-
Just a quick segue, and I know I've harped on this for some time, but this reminded me of it. I really would like kind of a time of year where personnel committee, maybe we can call it an annual audit of personnel, where we literally just one
The
meeting.
personnel committee could select any date they wanted, we would give you an update up to the point where we had the information.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, I guess I want to identify a good time to do that, to look at what our personnel,
As I say, currently,
yeah.
The department and division heads are doing performance evaluations for their non-bargaining unit direct reports. So that's our first step of the process.
Yeah.
Then it's also working with the mayor, then on what the scale would be for increases. Is there going to be a flat, I'll say, cost of living, cost of performance? So that's something that we're working on next, as well as the fact that we have to be mindful of the codified ordinances that only allow the mayor to give up to a 7% increase in a 12-month period, not a calendar year period.
Yeah.
So there's some people that might not be on the same calendar as the majority.
Are we trying to synchronize those calendars?
That is something that we're gonna look at having to do, and that may require us to come back to council.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that something we could do on this committee where, you know, he's outside, maybe you wanna give close to that 7%, you wanna account for that extra time that person may have to wait for another review
So
to
that's why we
justify.
may, once this all shakes out with the evaluations and putting together a plan, we'll see what positions we have to come back to personnel to ask for that, to get everybody back
Yeah.
into like the same timeline.
Okay, so I guess I would like to set up that meeting so we can see the percentage increases, the new hires, what everyone's making, and then kind of still, I think that would be a good time to do a comparison of neighboring jurisdictions, get a price point of whether we're competitive. and do that right after the evaluation. So we're looking at the raises that you guys are proposing, even though it may be less than that 7%, I'd still like eyes on it. What positions we might be looking for hiring in the next year. Kind of, I guess, almost the financial aspect of our personnel committee. I'm looking over that and then getting a yearly pattern of looking at those documents every time the same year at that period after those decisions are made within the administration. Because I think that's a really good way for us to be cohesive.
Human capital.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure everyone's happy, and if we need to address some things in personnel, I think they would become apparent during that type of meeting too, so. Not changes to personnel, but compensation, maybe I should say.
All right, are we good? Ready to move on to 26609-1, paragraph C. Again, we are just cleaning up some language and replacing some of the job titles that were outlined prior with the pay bands.
Now, in section C4, did we figure out an index? I know Amber was gonna potentially look.
So Amber looked and surveyed several other jurisdictions, but she cannot find anything that ties it to something, to some other indice.
Okay,
And I surveyed a couple of our neighboring jurisdictions myself, and most of them had just a flat fee and a flat dollar amount of insurance for everyone.
yeah.
It didn't matter if they were an executive versus an entry-level position. I surveyed Lucas County, Bowling Green, Maumee. They were all just a flat dollar amount per person.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm trying to think of a way you can do this too. Because these are our hourly, right? Pay band E.
Yes.
Yes.
So is it,
But if you're looking for that annual kind of update, maybe that's the time in which you decide.
That's true,
Is
yeah.
that still the right number?
And the bargaining units are eligible for life insurance as well, and that's a negotiated item within their contracts.
okay.
So,
Yeah, it's just one of those, I'm trying to think of a cognizable, most of our pay band E are full-time still, right? They do
Yes.
the 40 hours.
Yeah.
So if you could almost say, their pay rate times X amount of hours is what
so their annual salary.
exactly.
Because you could-
Basically their annual salary without
You could
using the
have
word
us
salary.
You could have us do the average annual salary of everybody in that pay band, and then have that be the basis of that number.
That would be fine too. Honestly, I was just looking for a way to do it for each employee where, hey, this guy's making 15 times his hourly by X amount of hours, which would be the yearly total we'd expect out of them in our compensation package, and then it would stay consistent without necessarily addressing what their pay is.
We can keep,
Yeah,
researching. As I'm looking at other aspects of other organizations, and I'm reading their charters and their codified ordinances, I can take note of anything that seems different than what we're doing.
Okay. Have any thoughts on that, Kevin?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't really, I guess, have an opinion on that. It's been kind of observing that. It's a little bit out of my.
Gotcha. I'm just trying to find a way to get a number out of there so you don't have to keep updating it and that it could kind of flow naturally on its own.
I think we kind of need to, I think it's something that would be almost appropriate to continue to review.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially if we're doing the yearly audits, I think that's a fair point, so.
I just have one question on the non-bargaining unit and the proposed benefit table you had. Pay band D, the tax administrator, it seemed like the only change was in the, so there's a reduction for proposed, the current code, deferred comp to the proposed deferred comp, went from 6% to 3%.
Not the current tax administrator.
Okay,
Yeah, the current tax administrator
will keep 6%.
will be at 6%. When that position gets replaced,
Then it will be,
then it would be according to the new table.
to this, okay.
yes, we're not reducing anybody's benefits.
I remember that being mentioned. I guess what I'm asking, is there a reason why that particular, it seems to be that was the only one, is there a reason why?
There is another one, the
Field superintendent.
field
Oh.
superintendent, the first one in Band D. He is currently at a matching 3%.
Breaks at 6.
I think she verified that for you.
Oh, okay.
I think she re-verified it.
All right.
But that then would change to whatever the new language is when that position changes.
Okay,
From that, from today's person to the next person.
Grant.
okay.
And because I think that tax administrator was spelled out in the code as a 6%. It was a weird carve out
Already,
15 years ago.
okay, okay. All right, that was the only thing that struck me. I like these graphs, thanks for putting that together.
Yeah,
it helps all of us.
really, yeah, it really gives us, that's what I observed, is like, why is it different here and not over here? So
And then you'll notice that there are some positions that were never listed in the nomenclature. So that makes it kind of awkward when they come in now to figure out, do they get anything, not get anything for deferred comp because they're not listed out in the code. So going to the pay bands makes it so much easier than having each individual position listed somewhere, because we haven't been the greatest at remembering to go back and change all the different sections of the code when we add a new position or title.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
26609-2, we made some amendments from the last meeting. I think that simplify it a bit.
So what we did is, instead of having that very large paragraph,
Yeah, we
we
broke it
tried to
up.
break it up into more manageable sentences. And the one that threw, I think Mr. McCarthy off and yourself, Mr. Coleman, was the language that currently says up to 15 8-hour shifts accumulated under sick pay may be used as parental leave by an employee following delivery of such, delivery of the spouse, which is supposed to be the child, of such employee, or following the day of adoption of the child by such employee. So we changed that up because the intent, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong here, we had extensive conversations internally on this. This language that we're proposing is kind of like the matching language that if an employee was the person giving birth to the child, medically, on the medical side of things, they get up to 6 weeks, not just of FMLA, but they can use their paid sick time for that 6 weeks after the birth. And then they can take another 6 weeks of FMLA, which may or may not be paid if they have sick time or vacation for bonding. What we're trying to do is to say, in the event that an employee who is not the birth parent has a baby in their family, immediate family, or if there's an adoption, that they can use this language to get the 6 weeks of bonding time paid if they have sick leave and or vacation. That's what we were trying to accomplish with this language.
Is it 30, is that limiting, is it up to 30 of accumulated time? Is that limiting them? Are there individuals that have over 30 accumulated days? I'd imagine there are, right?
Oh, okay,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Is that limiting them? I mean, the way I see it, that's kind of like that's their time, right? I mean,
Well-
in a situation, especially when, whether you're
It's
with
their
the birth parent or not, right?
It's
You want
their
to be there.
time for actual sickness, it is their time, but for bonding time, that would not be considered sick time unless there's this language in our codified ordinances.
Okay,
There was
so
none
that,
that
I guess
we-
that's what I'm saying, is like, so that, the way it's worded now is not affecting, it's just,
It's
It
more
was-
generous than
It was 3 weeks. It was actually 3 weeks.
and limiting the pay to only what was allowed by a doctor, a physician, that there was a very limited amount of sick time available, because there's no mechanism to pay
right,
under
okay,
FMLA unless we have this language.
all right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess that's, and I'm following you there, I guess in the way that it's worded, it's not you're just focused on just the bonding time?
Yes.
That's the way
Yes,
it's
or
worded.
just-
It wouldn't affect the non,
No, they
This wouldn't
could
affect
do,
anybody who had a doctor's note that said, I've just given birth, I've had a C-section, I need more than 6 weeks medical leave. Or a spouse has a doctor's note that says the birth parent needs to be cared for as well as the child, and therefore they need medical, the spouse needs to do medical leave to take it. This wouldn't affect any of that. This is just no doctor's note, bonding time, 6 weeks with the child.
266.
Hang on, Corey's got a page.
No, I'm just reading it. No. I'm good.
Good, you sure? You want to talk FMLA?
Oh, I was just looking, I thought the word delivery was an interesting word in that paragraph, if you're wondering what my face was. Because they could be like delivery of adopted child and, like, is it delivery of a person to your house? You guys asked, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
So basically, you're seeing a store with a little baby and.
Well, I was, there's your traditional labor in delivery, but there's also
An
your,
Amazon box showing up with a baby.
no, exactly.
Okay, just so we know what you're thinking.
Amazon Prime.
He said you asked, right?
Last but not least, 26609-5. Again, we're making some clarifications to remove the job titles and replace those with the pay bands,
Yep.
so we don't miss job titles that has happened in the past.
And that's what this is, right?
Yep.
And
then-
that second highlight, that Ohio Municipal League Master, was not highlighted because it was a change, it was highlighted because I had to make sure from Amber that was what it was still called, and it is what it's still called. I just forgot to take the highlight off.
Okay.
Any questions?
I do not. Good with sending those on to council for approval.
I am, yes.
All right, we'll say QO. All right, charter review process. I don't know whether this is the right committee to be doing all of them. But I do know there is some interest in having proposed charter changes on the ballot this coming year. And I don't know the best tool to get those to council for discussion. But I do know there was interest in the last meeting at the law director, that language being changed. So that they are kind of on their own island, overseen by the mayor and council directly. So we had kind of unique language in there. Along with that, some of the other ones that I've considered and I would be interested in presenting to a full council, because it's my understanding it's a five members of council vote for a charter proposal. We can get that on a ballot. What do you know what the deadline is to present that or get that on the ballot?
I feel like we told you August last time, but
I think you said it.
don't remember the date.
Yeah, I think you said sometime in August, so which means I would like to move on it because that's something I would like to have ample discussions at a council meeting. I think it's appropriate to send it there, but it did generate on this committee. So one of those, and I would assume, Kate, it probably falls on you to draft the language that would go in the ballot with our oversight. So the first change or charter change proposed would be eliminating that language about law director being under the supervision of the city administrator. I also would like to have a discussion on the law director itself is a unique position. And I think it would probably be appropriate to have language in there that says and I'm not sure, do you know where the removal language is for the rest of the department heads?
I'm looking that up right now, I'm gonna show you.
So I do think that is one of my understanding is pretty much all department heads have to be removed on the recommendation of mayor, right?
Yeah, that's in the chart.
Okay.
It's city council.
Section 4.
So the proposed charter amendment would be that a supermajority could remove the law director. Would be one of those changes. I don't think that would be something I would want to apply to any of the other provisions. I think that's kind of the mayor's cabinet, but the law director is directly under, I believe, both and
Okay.
council and the mayor's kind of. So I think that would be one. And then I know in talking with a couple other council members that having a provision in there, and I'm not sure which city I'm supposed to reference, but I can have John Smith get you some language. It basically would require all department heads to attend council meetings and respective committee meetings for the, so Rob Ross would have to come to service unless they are excused by committee members.
We're no longer under the law director.
Huh?
We're no longer under the law director. You're now included.
We're talking about charter changes as a whole.
Sorry, I was confused.
Yeah, no.
You were like law director,
So,
law director.
but it would apply to, I think you and Bridget in particular, that you
Well, the
would,
charter already says that I have to attend all city council meetings.
this would apply to committee meetings as well, is my understanding of what Jonathan, and you may want to follow up with him, but I think makes sense to have the discussion here since we're talking about charter review. But the intent would be that the department heads are at the committee meetings unless they've asked to be excused and been granted, or been excused.
I've talked to
For
Jonathan
cause.
a couple times recently, he has not mentioned that.
Okay.
I think he's out of town right now, but I'll follow up.
I can follow up on that too. And I know he was stealing that language from other charters. I'm just not sure which city. I didn't see it in Maumese when I was looking right away. But those were the three that I can
Probably
remember.
wasn't Maumee because they don't have any committee meetings.
Okay.
They don't have any committees. And I don't
I mean,
think
has there been a you're talking to the new guy, right? Probably asked too many questions and everything like that, but, I say it jokingly, but I know citizens appreciate that. Have we had problems with department heads not showing up?
Well,
or-
I can't speak on the other committees. I know Kelly. I mean, I view Kelly as kind of the department head. She's always here at personnel, so.
Okay, I mean, yeah, she's not a department.
Oh, well.
We only have 4 appointments.
Your help in my committee meetings is very much appreciated then. I think,
So Alice as a department head attends the utilities committee meeting. Amber as a department head attends the finance committee meeting. But the service director does not attend the service committee meeting at Lumenist.
We don't have a head of rec, so
I'm the safety director, so I'm at safety committee meeting.
yeah.
Has that ever been requested? I mean, again, I guess my basis for asking some of these questions, like, I still look at the way the, our charter is structured, is not to continually open these things up for,
Right, yeah.
minor items that we could ask per request, like, there's a management system and process to get those people if we wanted them here,
The only item I've ever heard is, it was asked in a WPA committee meeting that I was physically out of town for, I was on vacation. They asked that if I could not be there, if the department had to be there.
And I'm honestly, I can't tell you
Okay.
exactly what the intent is, and I do think it's probably more appropriate to discuss on a council of a whole, but that is
Yeah.
one particular one that I have heard from Council President Smith,
And I will say
so.
that we have various departments / division heads that coach basketball or coach other sports.
Yeah.
And.
And honestly,
are
I
available.
don't necessarily think it's coming from a place of, any of these coming from a place of malfeasance. It's more of trying to lock in things we like from other charters that we may want to implement, or just have the general discussion. We may not do any of it, quite frankly. But I do know there's interest in having that conversation, so I think it's probably good to move that on to council.
Yeah, I'd like to, hopefully we're keeping a list of some of these items too that are being talked about, because if we don't open the charter review, right, we'll do it at our, what is it, 10 years?
Yeah, so it was done in 18.
There you go, you're right.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure somebody's keeping a list.
And Amber keeps a list, I ask her, as we hear things.
as things come up where I look at it and I go, it's not a crisis, but I'd like to talk about it at the 10-year review, I keep a list.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seemed like that the charter review committee was pretty diverse, right? I mean, you had different backgrounds, you had lawyers, you had different.
And what we've done for last charter review committee is, I gave all my notes from the previous, it wasn't, I hadn't been here 10 years at the time, and gave them to him, who was kind of like clerking the charter review committee, and he gave all of that information to that committee to make a decision on whether they wanted to proceed with that or have discussion, as well as things that they were bringing themselves.
And I think the intent of what we're discussing, or the three that I brought up today, is more of those are kind of unique issues that council members themselves would directly deal with, which is why it would make sense for council or that recommendation to come from a super majority of council, rather than the citizen committee. So
Yeah, I understand things like that. I guess there's a potential conflict here because you're asking, like Kate, on the legal side of things, is looking into things that involve her position.
right, and there's an inherent thing, but
there's also the relationship within the dynamic within the office, right? The way you guys interact, putting them in a unique position to have to inspect themselves, which is great, at certain times, but to do that on your own and then make rules based on just simply our recommendation. That's why I think the Charter Review Committee, that process, it removes that, any subject to.
yeah. No, I get that. I guess the question would be, are you opposed to moving that on from this committee to just being a general, I don't even know that it has to be specific, but maybe it should be on the agenda. Well, maybe
We can just put under your
under my,
committee, discuss city charter,
okay,
and then you can decide how you want to do that.
okay.
And then
That-
we can also look to see after we have a charter review committee, where that proposed legislation went to. For some reason in my head, it either went to the finance committee because it was dealing with the electric, or it was a committee of the whole of council.
Yeah, and honestly, I think if I bring it up, we can hedge a plan for potentially having a committee of the whole meeting if we think it should be that. I think it should be all of council, because I think that's the dynamic we're kind of approaching that if we want to do it. I would view this as an interim charter review process by council specifically rather than the review committee. So, I would say let's take that off of this committee's agenda and move that on to be discussed at a council meeting. Are you good with that?
Yeah, it gets everybody together and, where this initiated, where it's potentially going. And
Yeah, and I think you're making very fair points, so it's, yeah.
I just think too, when it goes to ballot, right, or if
Yep.
we're ever to get there, I mean, one right now is we have a very short time period to get it there, but you're just including the voters, you're not, I know everybody has a right to go register and vote, right, but at the same time, there may be some other individuals, I know we've seen assistance from people outside of the city that said, hey, here's an example of this. It just allows for that process to be very sound.
Well, and I think it's a good year to do it too, with it being cost effective is what, less than $1,000 potentially if we put anything on there. So we'll move that on to city council to be discussed, perhaps even briefly at the next meeting. And then we'll move on to deputy city administrator position.
Yes, so far I've surveyed 28 different municipalities, similar in size to ours, and 19 of them have an administrator, and 4 of those 19 have a deputy administrator. So I'm very interested to understand how those 4 function. So Elaine is requesting position descriptions from those jurisdictions. One of those jurisdictions actually has 2 deputy administrators. That's Dublin, Ohio. Granted, they're a bit larger than we are. So looking forward to getting those descriptions. And I have 10 other organizations that we're waiting for information and feedback from. So we're continuing to move on that. Bowling Green, ironically, had a deputy administrator, and they recently just removed that position, but they changed it into more of a kind of like a director of, I'll say not necessarily public service, but it might have been like administrative services. I'd have to relook at that org chart, but they pulled certain, what used to be departments or divisions, and put them under what used to be the deputy administrator, giving it a new title. So I'm going to talk to Lori a little bit more about how that's functioning, because that just happened last December.
Okay.
That they just made that change.
Do you have an anticipated timeline on when Elaine is gonna?
She's already
on it.
She's reached out to them, so we're just waiting for them to respond to us. She's been reaching out to their human resource managers or administrators. So we're just waiting for those emails to come in with those, so we can look those over and look at position description as it was drafted when John Eckel was in that position versus having it mirror more of what I actually did.
Yeah.
And then looking to see, because as I said, I came from an organization where there was a deputy administrator, which happened to be myself, and I did everything that the administrator did, non-political. I'll just say it like that,
Yeah.
non-political. But that same organization a few years prior had two deputy administrators, and they divided up all the different department heads and put them into categories. One person had safety services, one person had more those services that administered all the departments, the HR, the IT, the finance. Somebody took purchasing, took that group, and then the leftover group, which was a few odds and ends, was then handled by the actual administrator. So there's a variety of ways to break things up. So that's what I'm interested to see how these other deputy administrators function.
Are you warming up to that? Like, when you're looking at it now, are you thinking a deputy administrator very well could be appropriate?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I have no hesitancy about having a deputy administrator.
It's
just,
scoping.
What exactly are they doing?
Gotcha.
So are they my shadow?
Yeah.
Or do they have specific responsibilities while learning all the other aspects of the city?
So I guess what I would do is challenge you before you even get those other descriptions, because you're going to know Perrysburg just about as well, if not better than anybody else in this room, especially when it comes to the operations, the daily operations. So I guess I would challenge you to write your ideal job description beforehand, or bullet point. It doesn't have to be,
Be careful, I got some duties from some of the other administrators out there, and they look pretty good.
So, create something that you think would be fitting for Perrysburg in the situation that we're in, and then hopefully those other descriptions come in and you can steal tidbits that would be even better.
I've also talked to some of the jurisdictions that don't have, ironically, like out of the 28 so far that I've looked at their codes, their charters, gotten work charts back, there's 10 of them that don't have any administrator.
Yeah.
And they're pretty sizable communities.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to figure out how they function.
Are they mayor driven?
Some have mayors that are full-time, but some mayors are part-time. And they have like 9 direct reports. So how is that person
It's because they doctor the
is
books.
facilitating that information? So I'm interested in that, as well as those that have administrators but have no deputies, how they're really functioning.
Right.
I mean, maybe there's somebody inside that kind of acts as a de facto deputy administrator, like a service director or a public works director.
Yeah.
So I'm also pooling them to get some information from them.
Yeah, I guess from my viewpoint, I can only speak for myself, is I would much rather trust you to craft something that is right for Perrysburg rather than, sometimes copying a mold is really good, but if we need to craft something specifically for Perrysburg, we don't have to be like every other community in the way we operate, especially if it works for us.
Well, I can tell you right now by looking at work charts, we don't operate the same as everybody
Yeah.
else.
So you're gonna know, and present that to us, be ready to tell us why we want, what we want or what, but I will say one of the things I care about the most in that deputy administrator is, so when you're out of town, that person is gonna be the person that is making it seem like you're still here in a sense, if that makes,
Oh, yes.
so,
And just so you know, somebody does step in
yeah.
when I'm not here.
Right.
There is a go-to person.
No, I get that, but I also feel like I have a feeling we're not operating the exact
I'm
same.
like, don't think I just walk away.
Yeah, no, I don't think that.
I'm too much of a control freak for that.
But I know Tim mentioned, he's not here, but I know he mentioned like longevity, right? So for someone else because where do you train for that role, right? Or where do you pull
Nowhere.
from that? Where's the talent pool, right? Right.
I came out of a finance firm.
Hopefully, people want to steal our deputy administrator. Realistically, and hopefully we can keep them if we want
And
to.
Bowling Green did. 'Cause
Yeah.
They took him from the county.
Yeah. So ideally, we want to create a position where people want to steal from what we're creating, but also we'll give you the resources to keep them if we have to.
And I think we certainly would have some people that might be interested in running.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that's great. I look forward to. We'll keep that on the agenda. Is there an optimistic timeline for that? Do you have a goal timeline to have that decision?
I hope to have a position description done sometime this summer.
Okay.
And this summer is literally 2 months away.
Yeah. Perfect. I like hearing that.
Just another thing for Kelly's County board.
If we're moving charter discussion to city council, is that coming off of this committee's agenda?
Yes.
then?
Yep.
Okay. I just like to say things out loud, so.
Yeah, I thought I said that, but
Yeah.
yes, that would be the
Okay.
intent, because I do think we're missing a vast majority of the people that
Okay.
should be discussing it at a committee level. So, yeah, that can come off. Let's keep the deputy city administrator just for the updates as we go. If you come up with a description, I'd love to see that, or if you get all the other descriptions.
This committee does bless job descriptions, that are new job descriptions, and
Yeah.
based on what I have read of the job description that was utilized prior, it certainly doesn't reflect what I do. So
Right, yeah.
We'll need to come back to personnel.
Okay, perfect.
In fact, when we read it, we were kind of surprised. So,
Any other business?
I did have something I want to bring up, just to really just initiate discussion to see if it's, I guess, worthy or viable, and that this actually would be a personnel goal. I know the city of Toledo has what they call a wage enforcement coordinator, and what that deals with, like, I see it most, I guess, in my vocation in construction, but I know it gets into other aspects of commerce and things like that, and just a way to interact, like it's a tax, we call it tax fraud. It's basically a worker misclassification. The IRS has a standard of classifying workers. And then this wage enforcement coordinator, what they're doing in Toledo, actually go out and they accrue revenue that should be gained. It's already out there. It's just people are kind of cheating the system.
so when Mr. Wilson goes out there, is he looking at city projects that the city is funding? Or is he looking at non-city projects?
It's non-city projects. That seems to be where the bulk of it, I guess, happens.
So like taxable entities, basically?
Yeah, that just essentially aren't paying taxes. So, and it's not just, I guess, just a personal interest. I just noticed it was a unique position that seems to be more than paying for itself. It's actually accruing revenue that's out there that we should already be getting, we're just not. The other thing is too, there's a couple other municipalities, I know, some individuals from Bowling Green, some elected officials there, and also in Rossford. And somebody mentioned me the other day that Northwood potentially this might be a valuable role, like not maybe Perrysburg take on the entirety of it, but maybe it'd be a shared role. I don't know. I don't have something in mind, but I know the ordinances and their structures between the municipalities are set up entirely different, but I just thought it might be something to look into to see if it would be relevant.
I used to have Mr. Wilson's phone number.
All for positions that pay for themselves, so.
Yeah, and I guess this will more than.
Yeah, well, which makes sense.
I guess I just see there's multiple things here. I guess that kind of spun around in my mind with people working from home. Like, I feel like in a way they're indirectly paying an additional burden. With more people working at home, I think they're paying more, and then you have an entire tax base that is not contributing, that should be. They're operating actually.
I can say that our withholding is down, so we do believe that there are people who are permanently working from home who have made that change with their employer. So they are not paying city Perrysburg taxes anymore, that live in another jurisdiction. And I can tell you for any city funded project, we make sure at our pre-construction meeting that one of the individuals there is our tax administrator, and he brings all the forms that are necessary, and they all get filled out, so we're very diligent on city-managed projects. And when it comes to outside city projects for individuals, I know that they spend time down there combing through newspapers, online. They do a lot of research to see if they can find people who are not paying taxes who should. But I can certainly have a discussion with Amber and Steve on that.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a lot of details on it. I just wanted to start maybe some discussion. I don't expect anything to happen
And I'll give Mr.
anytime
Wilson
soon.
a call.
Okay. And yeah, if there's anything I can do, I mean, again, I see it in my daily vocation, during the construction industry mainly, but I know it does, go over into other, and it's been prevalent here, I know, and it's actually gone on some, not city project, but projects within the city. I'm sorry,
In Northwest Ohio.
in the city of Perrysburg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I guess it's just a matter of how far would you, is that role relevant? I guess is just what I'd like to explore.
With that, do we have anybody that makes sure our contractors are adhering to prevailing wage and stuff too?
Yes.
I would assume, okay.
Yeah, on city projects, every project is mandatory to have a prevailing wage coordinator. Somebody has to, whether it's the
Yes,
architect.
she works under the engineer, so
Okay.
Both payrolls review as well as on-job interviews.
Yeah, and I know it's not necessarily the same exact thing, but I would,
Yeah.
similar.
These would be for individuals that would be working in a project, a particular project. It might be within that would go beyond that 20 day,
So
within the city.
Promedica's project, making sure that those contractors, subcontractors
Exactly,
are all registered with the tax department.
yes. I mean, just as an example, and maybe used in other ways, but that's something I know Mark Wilson, that's his role for the city of Toledo, but he would probably be the one to maybe get some of that detailed information from.
Okay.
And then if there's anything I can do, any information, I'd be more than happy to provide.
You can give his number to me, as I mentioned, I just saw him last week.
Are we gonna see safety coordinator in this committee again?
Well, we have that's been posted, that coordinator.
Did we already see it?
For the occupational safety and health.
Yes.
Or safety director, we changed the title, so it would be used the safety director title.
That position did come through this.
Yeah, and
We're good, right? Are we, because I know it's gonna be part-time. I can't remember.
We're good,
Okay.
we're advertised and we're looking over applications.
Good, and it's full-time,
Yes,
and we expect it to pay for itself. Good.
just like qualified candidate at this point, to be honest.
Going back to the conversation of
Okay,
getting people to.
Oh, yeah.
apply.
yeah. Well, I guess certainly let us know if you're having trouble with attracting people, and what we can do to help with that. Yeah. All right, any other business?
That's all we have.
All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thanks.